Okay, so as a general point, by the way, this is what our scholars have taught us, that before reading a book, you must read the introduction of the book. Because whoever does not do that has wronged and done injustice to the author. Because you will not understand, how they've approached the book.
And why do authors take 85 pages to talk about everything except the book itself?
Some do and some don't.
No, more of, I think some is an unfair word for. Why do they respond to Western criticism in Arabic?
Well, that's a good question.
Okay, well, there's a lot of books here because Sheikh Sohaib got a little excited about this section, Quranic subjects. So hopefully we can start undoing these building blocks. But yeah, tell me why you're so excited about this again.
Okay, so this is a section about what we can call tafsir al-mawdu'i. We studied that as a subject in al-Azhar. So these are actually some of the books that I used to study. He wasn't a direct teacher of mine, but he's a scholar in our faculty, Sohaib Saeed.
Can you explain tafsir al-mawdu'i? You said subjects, but
Yeah. So tafsir al-mawdu'i is basically an approach to surveying a topic throughout the Quran. So we'll see some examples, but we'll take one about, some of these are quite complex. A simple topic could be bees. Okay, there's not many verses about bees. That would be very easy. So there wouldn't be much to write. But if you took, for example, hikmah.
Oh, that's a big one.
Hikmah in the Quran. Where does the word hikmah appear? What are the circumstances of it? What does it therefore mean? What can we understand by taking this global view of the Quran rather than the local view of a particular ayah? Because when you're studying, whether it be a word or a concept or an idea in one ayah, your picture is not complete until you see, okay, what else is said in the Quran about this? How does that shed light on what I'm understanding here?
Right.
So that's a general operation of tafsir. Then you can also take that and just write a subject paper on that. On that
particular word, theme, subject.
And that should follow certain principles and norms and approaches, which is what they talk about as a subject of tafsir al-mawdu'i.
I see.
So I've thrown a whole bunch of things down here, salam, peace in the Quran, the Quran in the Quran, what the Quran says about the Quran. So I've got a few things on that. Sunan Allah fil umam. So what can we understand about how Allah deals with different nations over time? Al-aql wal-ilm fil Qur'an al-Kareem, Shaykh al-Qaradawi.
Interesting.
Very, very useful book. Al-hiwar, dialogue in the Quran.
Dialogue in the Quran.
So what
which
you can
is
also,
a very powerful literary dimension of the Quran.
So it's not always about the meaning of a word or
it could be a stylistic thing too, right?
An aspect of the Quran.
Right.
So hiwar, all types of discussion that takes place. It's not the word hiwar you're looking for, which
right.
is dialogue, but you're looking at the dialogue.
Dialogues themselves.
So this is actually one of the early works in this genre by Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah Daraz, who's an important author in Quranic studies. He's the author of An-Naba al-Azim.
Right. I've read An-Naba al-Azim.
Which is called The Quran and Eternal Challenge in English.
Right.
But he actually wrote this book originally in French. I don't have the French one. I don't know if it's really published. But this is the English translation. This is the Arabic translation.
Tell me you don't read French.
I don't read French well, but I do try sometimes. So, but it would be nice to have it. I wouldn't mind if someone has got his book in French, just because there'd be a lot of barakah in that. But in a way, the Arabic translation by Abdul Sabur Shaheen.
Mm-hmm.
You see the connection?
Yeah.
In a way, I feel like he was translating it back into Arabic because it's an Arabic topic,
right?
To do with the Quran. So, but he made it as if that feels like the original book, Dustur al-Akhlaq, the constitution of ethics in the Quran. So
very interesting.
And what he did was he did this at the Sorbonne in Paris. He compared the Quranic approach with various Western ethical thinkers and philosophers. So there's the English translation from the French, I think.
I mean, we have quite a few English followers. I think it
Moral
might be
words
worth a read.
of the Quran. Yeah, I would prefer, to be honest, that they translate from the Arabic, even than the French. But
Really?
yeah,
Are there editions in the Arabic that the English doesn't have?
um, I'm not sure. My feeling is probably based on
The
just as I
credentials of the
say,
translator?
yeah. I
Yeah.
think the translator understood well enough that his translation then becomes authoritative in understanding what was intended by the author in French.
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't always say that, but in some cases. So here I've got a kind of subset of things to do with al-qasas al-qur'ani.
Okay.
So let me just move some of these other things out of the way, which are not necessarily... Okay, let's see. There's Love in the Holy Quran by Prince Ghazi of Jordan. That's become quite famous. I have the Arabic one as well, Al-Hub fil Quran al-Kareem. And then we've got...
Ooh, there's a whole book on Itab al-Rasul. Really?
Check it out. Because there are several different ayat where it seems that the Prophet ﷺ is being, told off
Corrected
by his Lord and Master in some particular way.
Yeah.
So what do we understand by these? What can you learn by looking at these junctures together? That's what that book is concerned. Dr. Salah al-Khalidi, isn't it? He passed away quite recently. Manhaj al-Quran fi Arud Aqidat al-Islam. It's quite a nice topic to see how Aqidah is dealt with in the Quran itself. Adab al-Kalam fi Daw al-Quran al-Kareem. Manners of speech. Al-Wasatiyya fi al-Quran al-Kareem. You could say centrism, moderation, balance, according to the Quran. And this is one that Sheikh Shahri was...
I asked him about that.
You asked him for a good book on Amthal, that is to say parables and examples in the Quran.
Yeah.
He recommended this one to you.
Can I see that?
Yep.
You better put your stamp on this one too, brother.
If it goes to good use, then, No, you're still not getting it.
Because I've seen you under pressure situations say yes to things and later say, why did I say yes?
By now, I know you long enough that I can just say no.
Yeah, there's no pressure now.
Qasas al-Quran. Stories in the Quran, I guess, it's kind of obvious. You got famous works like Ibn Kathir's Stories of the Prophets.
Right.
So a lot of the stories in the Quran are stories of the Prophets, but not exclusively.
Not exclusively.
Beyond that, this is quite a nice one by Dr. Ahmed Nawfal, where he talks about Manahij al-Ta'lif or Manahij al-Bahthi wa al-Ta'lif fi al-Qasas al-Qur'ani. So, there he is there. So this is a nice sort of
he's talking about
methodological.
The Quran's approach to describing the stories?
No, he's talking about how we, when writing about Qasas al-Quran, can have a good methodological approach.
Oh.
I think.
Oh, so he's not... Okay, yeah.
I think because I'm pretty sure I haven't read this book, or I've maybe dipped into it at least. Okay, so as a general point, by the way, this is what our scholars have taught us, that before reading a book, you must read the introduction of the book. Because whoever does not do that has wronged and done injustice to the author. Because you will not understand, how they've approached the book.
And why do authors take 85 pages to talk about everything except the book itself?
Some do and some don't.
No, more of, I think some is an unfair word for to describe the proportion of the ones that do.
Even you can skim the introduction, but the other thing they say is that before putting the book on the shelf, read the introduction, read the index page, and then you get a sense of what that book is before it goes on your shelf and maybe gets lost there. So generally speaking, I follow that rule, but there's probably a few cases where I didn't have the time. We've got some which are nicely... This is Fadl Abbas again. Remember we saw his face over here.
Yeah.
He's got a really nice book looking at stories in the Quran and not just of the Anbiya. This is a really nice one by Abdul Karim Zaidan.
So what are they doing when they're looking at stories in the Quran? Are they just extracting lessons? Are they...
So the reason I put this under tafsir al-mawdu'i is because what you do is you gather different ayat pertaining to like a prophet like Musa Islam, his stories in so many places. So you need to reconstruct the order in which these events are happening so that a person can understand how that is. And then they're basically telling the story and connecting things together, and where necessary filling gaps. You might get some further information from hadith and so on that helps you to fill any gaps in your story-based understanding.
So it's interesting, like for example, Salih alayhi salam, first thing he does is mention what 8 surahs he's been talked about in, and then the difference in style and the way he's talked about as opposed to Nuh, and between Nuh, Hud, and Salih alayhi salam, and then finally an overview and a sequential account of the story of Salih alayhi salam. So it's kind of I'm supposing this is his approach to all of them.
Yeah, and what he also does sometimes, because he's looked at some earlier books in Qasas al-Quran, so he's one of the authors who doesn't pretend like nobody wrote anything before. So he'll sometimes shed some light on misconceptions that arise, or things that have been written that need some
clarification.
Yeah, this with the Qasas. So this one is nice as well, by Abdul Karim Zaidan, which is focused on lessons for people involved in da'wah.
Very nice.
So it's very clearly structured that way. He'll mention the events, and then he'll say, okay, these are the sort of tarbiyah points and the lessons that we can take as people who are, trying to work for the cause of Islam in one way or another in this world. And I guess the last one from this I'd mention is, again, a subset, al-shakhsiyya al-nisa'iyya fi al-qasas al-qur'aniyya.
Oh,
actually, fi al-qasas al-qur'aniyya, because they've used the plural word. So this is nice as well. And when we look at English books, we'll see some modern interventions into this subject as well.
I'd be curious to see what he's...
She.
Oh, she. Okay.
I mean, I'd like to think that a male author might also have written this, but I'm quite glad that, to be honest, this is a female author. Huda Abdul Latif Aryan. Yeah. So the next bunch that I pulled off the shelf concerns, well, it's a little bit of a mixture. This is a classical work by As-Suyuti on I'jaz al-Quran called Mu'tarak al-Aqran. You're complaining that some of the titles don't look like they rhyme. Usually when you look at the full title, you'll find the rhyming version.
Yeah.
This, from what I've been able to surmise through looking through it, actually has a lot of overlap with his book Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran. So I'm not sure exactly what was the nature and purpose of that authorship. But then a lot of this is to do with the history of the Quran and some questions and challenges raised against the Quran. So kind of apologetic defense of the Quran. So
the word apologetic in the dictionary and apologetic in academia is significantly different. I'd like you to explain the difference.
Yeah. So I don't mean like saying sorry for the Quran, but just making the argument for the truth of the Quran.
Right.
Especially in the context where, obviously some people don't believe in that and some people make arguments against the Quran. So apologetics is generally the field in which you mount that defense and you present the positive arguments also to believe that this Quran is from Allah, and also to respond to, contentions by people outside. So, I mean, this is such a mixture of things. This is a classical book, Fada'il al-Quran, but it's got some aspects of the history of the Quran, which is why I've got it here. And then I've got books on the history of the Quran, the most celebrated one by Muhammad Mustafa al-Azami, the history of the Quranic text. So in English, this remains, absolutely the best thing. Everyone should have a copy to be aware of aspects of the history. The same author has got a separate book on the scribes of the Prophet ﷺ, those who wrote down the revelation. And he, I think he reaches about 60 scribes. Although there's some dispute as to the identity of all of them, but there could be as many as 65 people who were writing the Quran for the Prophet ﷺ. But also in Arabic, there are other works on Tarikh al-Quran. And in particular, Dr. Muhammad Hassan Jabal, who is the author of al-Mu'jam al-Ishtiqaqi, we use a lot. He has some other books in the field of Quranic studies, such as this one talking about the 7 ahruf of the Quran. That's a subject that we'll come back to as well. He talks about al-talaqqi wal-ada' fi al-qira'at al-Qur'aniyya. So again, the transmission of the Quran orally. And then this book, which is Wathaqatu Naql an-Nass al-Qur'ani al-Kareem.
The book before this one? You see.
التلقي والأداء.
Yeah. Is
So
this a history of التلقي والأداء?
yeah, he's kind of making some point about how the oral aspect fits in alongside other aspects, and how there are sometimes some small details which one could. There are dispute over, there's some very, very precise details in tajweed, for example. And some people will say, well, I received from my sheikh, or received from his sheikh, or received from his sheikh, so that can't be questioned because of the isnad aspect. So he's saying, well, that goes alongside other aspects. So one can study things in terms of the text and in terms of the linguistics, and to say that the transmission, the oral transmission, and the isnad is one aspect that exists alongside others. But yeah, in the history of the Quran, he's got this one, وثاقة نقل النص القرآني. And we've got here, Bismillah.
Easy.
Whoa, I got it. Abdul Sabur Shaheen.
Save.
Abdul Sabur Shaheen again.
Here we go again.
With Tariq al-Quran, which is one of the sources that Professor Adami uses. These are some books that are sort of responding to those who are suggesting that there's contradictions in the Quran. So this is one by Dr. Khalidi, who's another book of his we saw earlier. Al-Quran wa naqdu mata'in al-ruhban. But ruhban here is not really supposed to be priests, but it's like some Christian missionaries and their contention. So he's responding to a particular book of theirs. I think by, there's a guy who still appears on YouTube, I think, Al-Fadi. Anyway, so he's responding to that. And this is by Sheikh Shinqiti, who's the author of Adwa al-Bayan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Again, responding to things which might appear to be contradicting the Quran, how we understand them correctly. Muhammad Mohra Ali is another one who, he's a Bengali scholar, passed away, rahimahullah, the Quran and the Orientalists. This was quite a influential book for me when I first read that. And Fadl Hassan Abbas has got this book where he is responding to things in Encyclopedia Britannica which concern the Quran. And that probably...
Why do they respond to Western criticism in Arabic?
Well, that's a good question. Because that's what they can do. So this would kind of happen when, in the first place, someone can either read Encyclopedia Britannica in his original language, or if it's translated into Arabic. So sometimes it happens that people translate the work of Orientalists into Arabic,
and then
then the ideas start to spread, and then people are worried that, okay, Muslims or Arabs in general will be confused by these ideas, so we need to respond to them. So they respond in Arabic for that audience. They're not necessarily thinking about the Western audience, the Anglophone audience. That's not their primary concern. If they wanted to reach them, then they should have these books then translated into those languages. I think that there's still a divide and disconnect between Arabic language material and English language material,
correct,
and other languages, which we need to do something about.
Yeah.
And again, Markaz Tafsir, whom we visited, one of the really exciting things that they're doing is translating a lot of things into Arabic, and not the old Orientalist things from the 18th and 19th centuries, but in fact, they're translating the latest pieces of research that are being published in Western journals. So that's really important. Then they're letting their audience of researchers look at what's being said now, in order to benefit from any ideas that are good in there, but also to respond to things that require response.
It's interesting that they're not really doing anything to translate what the Muslim world's doing. We are, though.
In reverse.
It was actually an acknowledgement of some of that at Iqsa, that we're just assuming that there's nothing really to be offered.
Yeah, and Professor Walid Saleh also notes in some of his writings that there's been an assumption, there's a continued kind of unspoken assumption in much of Western writings that secondary scholarship, which is to say, contemporary scholars, they're like the people who are here on these lower shelves especially, they can't contain any kind of critical insight. You know, they will just be parroting things. They'll just be making assumptions and assertions and
Right.
doctrine based. There would be nothing here that a critical-minded Western scholar can benefit from. Which he said, you know, we really need to challenge this kind of assumption or this kind of bigotry, really, which is what it comes down to. What did you find?
I found كمال اللغة القرآنية بين حقائق الإعجاز وأوهام الخصوم.
Yeah. So I think, again, some people are, again, sort of on polemical missionary channels, they will say, oh, there are such and such grammatical mistakes in the Quran.
Right.
So this book specifically addresses these claims of grammatical mistakes in the Quran.
Yeah. Very cool. Very, very cool.
Okay. Shall we wrap up here and then come next to the massive field, which is tafsir?
The mother lode. Tafsir.
The central topic of it all.
Yeah. Everything else is feeding into that. Yeah, we'll come to tafsir next. This has been great.
Salam everyone, it's Dr. Sohaib here. You've had the chance to look inside my library. Now I'd love to take you inside some of what I've learned from there, especially in the flagship project of the Ibn Ashur Center, which is distilling the insights of a great mufassir, Muhammad al-Tahir ibn Ashur. We have a special course for you on Surah Yasin. I'd love you to get involved. I'd love you to benefit from our new translation and commentary on the Quran. Head over to ibnashur.com/academy to find out more. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.